All right, thank you. I'm so honored to be here with you today, Obehi. So, I am Jamaican. I am a helping professional in Jamaica. I am a mother of two adult children whom I am very proud of.
Hello and welcome to Obehi Podcast. I'm your host, Obehi A14, and I strongly believe that everyone has a story to share. Now let's get started with this episode.
And I am at a part in my development where I am just excited. I'm on a growth pathway, and I'm also on the path where I am helping other individuals to get on their growth path. So most of my working day is spent with the Department of Correctional Services as an offender management specialist. And I'm also a licensed associate counseling psychologist for the island of Jamaica and a part of the professional body, Jamaican Psychological Society, a part of their executive. And I love reading, and I love attending plays, and I love to laugh at myself.
That's interesting. You are dealing with psychologists. All that makes sense. Now, give us a little background. Why do you like psychology? What drove you in there? What interests you in it?
I think it's more a calling. Ever since I was a child, I have had that inclination to be helping others. And so as soon as I got to high school, maybe about fourth form, or it's now grade 10, I realized that this is where I wanted to go. Interestingly, I got sidetracked a little bit, and I ended up studying management studies and operating my own business for 15 years. But even whilst I was operating business, I always found an outlet to be helping others. So I was a part of community groups, getting involved with church groups, schools, and for some of that, I was awarded on different occasions for community service. So after some time, it became apparent to me that operating business was not what I was meant to do. So after 15 years, I closed its doors, and then I joined the Department of Correctional Services. I also teach. So I teach at the graduate level, and I have taught at various institutions and also at the secondary level. So I would say my calling called me back. So I went into probation, started working with young offenders who had run afoul of the law before they were 18 years old, and recognized that to help them effectively, I needed to formalize my skills even better. So I went on to pursue a Master of Science in Counselling and Consulting Psychology, and later a postgraduate diploma in loss, grief, and trauma management. And that has enabled me to work with individuals to help them to facilitate the kind of change that they need to facilitate and the kind of growth. So starting with the young offenders, I have expanded. And in my private sessions, I counsel with individuals and sometimes families, but mainly individuals, men and women, mainly women though. And I enjoy thoroughly.
Thank you for that. That is really interesting. I also like the way that you refer to it, the correctional expert. That is who you are. It's not like when somebody commit a crime now, it looks like somebody that we're going to be thrown away from the society. We need to give this person a second chance, help the individual to even understand why maybe what he or she has done is wrong according to the codes of the
Right,
society.
right.
So I really find that to be very interesting. Of course, we are talking about the prison system
Yes.
also, in that the society also make provisions for a space where you can go for some time to be excluded from the society so that you can think, know what you have done, and then come back again to the society. And in this small phrase, is a lot of things inside it. But anyway, I will leave that. I will leave that for now because I probably will touch it later. Now, let's take some time to know you because here we are really passionate about our story. Where are we coming from? Who we are?
Yes.
So, where were you born? Tell me something about your young adolescent years. I'm interested in that.
All right, great. So I was born in a little place in St. James. So St. James is one of the parishes in Jamaica. And I was born and grew up in a rural community called Granville. Later lived in an adjoining community called Pitford. I grew up in a single parent household with a very strong mother, strong matrifocal presence. My father, I was told, died when I was just a year old. So I was a year and maybe 2 months. He used to work for the power company here. He was on, well, thank you. And I've been processing that. I've had what they call delayed grief. It was not until I was an adult that I really mourned my father's passing. So I grew up primarily in a single parent household with two younger siblings. So I am the eldest of three children born by my mom, and went to high school, always kind of one of those students who was focused on education. So I went to high school. I was always involved in advocacy, and I suppose that's a part of my whole being in terms of helping others, in terms of the counseling field, because I was very involved in advocacy at the student level, always what we call in high school a student council representative, bringing forth the needs of the students to the administration until ultimately in my final year, I was the president of the students council body. And that continued when I went to community college. So, as I was sharing with you earlier, up to that point, I wanted to be either a social worker or someone in the helping professional. Of course, by the time I got to the community college and did in those days what we had as advanced levels, because we were doing the English examinations, now it's HAPE, from a Caribbean perspective. So there's CXC and there's HAPE. So to cut a long story short, there was no psychology at the advanced level, there was no sociology. And so the nearest approximation were the business subjects. And I am from a family of business people as well. So I said, all right. And management studies was trending at the time. So I went to the university and I did a first degree in management studies. Graduated with honors, came out, worked in the business field for a little bit. I was in non-traditional lending. And then I felt the pull to start my own business where I stayed for 15 years. Along the way, I managed to get married. I managed to commit my life to the Lord. So I became a Christian. And as I indicated earlier, I have two children. But throughout all of that, maybe nice sounding story, I have had some serious adversities, some serious setbacks. And those have brought out the resilience that is in me. Those situations have allowed me to culture my resilience and counseling from a place of experience and theory, so I can apply the theory to the experience, and it makes it that much more authentic, I believe. So as I shared with you, my father died when I was pretty young. I remember Obehi standing up one morning at 30 years old and just crying for my dad. Prior to that, and I like to say, even to your listeners, that sometimes we have losses and we don't recognize the impact that the losses have on us, but they do. And sometimes we say, oh, life has to go on. So we just go about life and we carry on, not recognizing that there's something deep down. And that's one of the reasons why I went and did further work in grief and loss, because I realized that losing individuals who are close to us, with whom we are connected, can be very, very difficult. And as we say in psychology, it brings us to a new normal. Life never ever goes back to the way we were. So that's the start of my loss trajectory. And then throughout life, I got divorced, unfortunately, at about almost my 20-year mark of being married. Something I pondered and struggled with and groaned, but eventually that decision came. And then sometime after that, my younger sister, with whom I grew up, died tragically in an accident, leaving three young boys. And that was something that's almost pulled the rug from underneath my feet. And then
So sorry about that.
yes, so I thank you for the expressions of condolences, and I've been learning to deal with my grief, to cope with my grief, to understand that losses bring pain and sometimes it can be traumatic. And as I said, it changes, when you have a loss, it changes your life and the whole gamut of feelings. Sometimes people have losses and they're like, why am I feeling this way? And as a helping professional, you help them to understand that, hey, when you lose someone, it's like a part of you is really gone. And so you have this wave of emotions that you can experience: the grief, the anger, the guilt, the questioning, the hopelessness, the sadness. And that's some of what I help individuals to understand and to get through as they go through their own grief journey. And I don't know, I've always loved writing. So for me, I use and I encourage individuals, friends, clients to use journaling. It's a very, very therapeutic tool for adversities and also for expression, because sometimes you find that when you journal, your creative juices come to the fore and you're writing like you never knew you could or you would. So yes, and in the midst of all that, I have been the subject of, I would say, robbery attacks on 3 different occasions, and I have bounced back. One of the things I want to say, though, as I speak about my journey, because my hope, my desire, my aim, not just with the individuals I counsel with on a one-on-one basis, but when I speak to students at schools, when I go to churches, when I'm speaking to organizations, my desire is that my story and my ability to bounce back and to overcome must be like a parachute for others. So it gives them a soft landing. It encourages them, it empowers them to know that, okay, well, Yvette did it, so it's possible. My counselor did it, so it's possible. Because sometimes in counseling, you have to engage in a little self-disclosure to allow your clients to understand that you're not up there and they're down there, that we're all humans with human experiences that can really impact us. In all of that, I must say that I've had serious struggles with my personhood, that whole sense of insecurity. And people say to you, a bright girl like you, how you so insecure? Or a smart lady like you, how you must be insecure? But the truth is that some of these things are born out of our childhood experiences, and they stay there at a very subliminal level, and they impact our choice of partners, they impact how we relate, they impact our careers, they impact how we see ourselves. So on that journey and in my self-exploration, I have been able to help others and to let them understand that a lot of times people go about and they look well, they dress well, they speak well, they behave well, and we're minded to think that they have it all together. But it's important to know that there are many times when messages that we take on in childhood, mechanisms that we use to cope in childhood, can undermine the very essence of who we are in adulthood. So a part of what I do is helping people to recognize, especially when they come to me for counseling, a thread that I've found to be common is some of the messages that they either received or appropriated to themselves in childhood, which impact especially their interpersonal relationships now.
Thank you so much for that. That is powerful. I'm going to spend some time there just now when you talk about yourself. And I think when you were also referring to going deep in grief and in loss, I think those things actually reveal something to us, reveal the essence of life to us. In 2020, that was 3 years ago, I spent an entire year basically talking about self improvement in this podcast because I find that to be very important, also because of the demography that we are serving, which is the African diaspora demography. And of course, we started with the immigrant in northern Italy because that was where my research actually started from.
Ah,
in that we have a lot of baggage that we are carrying along, no? We cannot pretend that it's not there. Maybe you have left your country because of war that is happening. And that in itself is a lot of things, you know. You have lost people if it is in the time of war.
yes.
But let's say you haven't even lost any person, but there are a lot of psychological drama, trauma, and even drama too.
Yeah.
If
Yes.
if you have been trafficked to Italy, like in the case of many Nigerian women, because that is what have happened to them until recently, it has subsided. And in many other instances, it becomes very important that we look at ourselves again and ask the question, who really I am?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So at a certain point, I decided to write a book that I titled Crisis of Identity,
Oh, yeah.
because it is very important for us. Anyway, I want to take us back a bit to what you were saying. I want you to explain to me, what do you mean by going deep in grief and in loss? I want you to explain, because now as a psychologist, you are helping people. I usually say that sometimes before you can help, you can understand what people are going through, somehow you are going to go through something. That is where you get the experience. Otherwise, you are just speaking from, I don't know, from a podium where you don't really understand what is the meaning of what you actually say. Perhaps you might understand something, but you don't really understand the emotive, the emotional impact people go through to be able to give them a better advice. Therefore, you need to live so that you can talk about life.
Yes.
So help me understand what you mean by going deep in grief and in loss.
A lot. Well, previously I had a very basic idea of, like loss, you lose someone and you cry a bit and so. But then as I studied and as I had my own experiences, first of all, it is so important to honor the emotions we experience with grief. And to understand that when we speak about loss, we're not just speaking about loss of an individual. We speak about loss of what we have come to know as normal. We speak about loss in terms of displacement. You spoke about the diaspora and the displacement of our women and what possibly being trafficked in Italy. So there are losses that are operating on a number of different levels. So the primary loss might be the loss of having to leave my home, because that is where I am grounded. That is where I knew the culture. That is where I was most comfortable. That is where I could, as you say, identify with. Now I'm in somewhere else. And if the experiences in that other place are unpleasant, it magnifies the kind of emotions that we experience. So deep, deep sadness, deep, deep longing, a sense of hopelessness, a sense of questioning. Did I do anything to occasion this? And that's something that in survivors of trauma or survivors of, relatives of loved ones, ask themselves, could I have done anything differently? Most times, the answer is really no. But we have this kind of guilt and this kind of questioning. So it is helping individuals to make peace with that, helping them to understand, for example, that when you go through a loss experience, you can have such intense physiological responses. We talk about the pit in the stomach. So it's so important for individuals to understand that there's a link between our physiological responses and what we experience in the material and the psychological realm. As a matter of fact, there is a book by a very prominent trauma specialist. I won't try to call his name, but it's The Body Keeps the Score. And so, in treating, especially with victims of trauma, they have found, the researchers, the experts have found that we might be going on with life, but the trauma is sometimes trapped in our bodies. And so interventions have to be employed. So, in terms of the physiology and the material, that one of the things, especially individuals who have gone through traumatic experiences. And when we say trauma, trauma is our psychological or emotional response to a horrific event, right? Different people might experience the same event and don't have traumatic responses. And by themselves, some events are just horrible. So there is a correlation between our physiological experiences or manifestations and what we've gone through psychologically. And I don't know if you caught the part where I mentioned that this expert who has done a lot of work in trauma, and he says that the body keeps a score. And more, the research is finding that especially people who go through traumatic grief, their whole nervous system is dysregulated. And so a part of helping them in therapy is helping to calm down the nervous system and bring them back into some kind of regulation. Because when your nervous system is dysregulated, it affects your ability to be productive. It affects your ability to concentrate. It affects your memory. A lot of people who have gone through trauma find that their memories are disjointed. They don't remember it like a running film. It's remembered in pieces. So these are all some parts of grief, loss, and trauma that when I work with individuals, I share with them. Some people, their grief will run its course, because the research shows that 70% of individuals who go through loss don't need therapy, but there's that other 30% who is stuck and need help to move forward. And that's when it becomes what we call complex grief or complex trauma.
Thank you so much for that. All right. Now, as I'm looking at your explanation, I'm thinking back to the conversation that I had yesterday. We have a series that we are tracing in this project. We call it Life and Legacy, in that we are looking at those that have been here before us, what they have done, what we can learn from them, because we are not alone.
That's right.
This life is a journey. There are those who have been here before us. For the fact that we can even speak the way we are speaking,
yes,
is thanks to those who have been here before us. They are the ones who set up the speaking mechanism, or the way that we communicate. We speak English, we speak Hausa, we speak Yoruba, and whatever language that we are speaking, we did not invent it. Other people before us have invented that way. Mm-hmm. So it is thanks to them that we are here, that we are able to do what we are doing today. You can talk of computer, if mathematics was not invented, the pyramid would not be built.
Right.
Because you needed to measure the weight. That is high mathematics. So the idea that we have computer today is not just thanks to somebody in US or somebody as a random person in France. It is based on the invention of our ancestors, several thousands of years. We have been building on them, one stone on top of the other. Yes. So we can't simply cut out the rest. All of us are in a continuous flow. So the essence of that series is to look at those that are before us and see how we can learn from them. Mm-hmm. So yesterday, I did an interview with a professor in the US, and we talked about the life of Frederick Douglass. And that was really powerful an interview. Now, why am I mentioning that? Because we are talking of trauma. Now, I'm trying to see if we can extend that to the whole of African diaspora history, for example.
Oh, yes.
Or the whole of Africa, as it were, because we have passed through a peculiar experience in human history. So that when we try to understand why we are where we are and doing what we do, sometimes we also need to understand that there are some experiences that we have passed through that is making us to do what we do. We cannot simply, therefore, correct today without thinking of yesterday, because we are product of yesterday. Mm-hmm. So now, how would you make that connection to the African diaspora, for example, to try and understand what they are suffering from, or what people refer to as epic genetic trauma? Mm-hmm. That there is a baggage that we are carrying. Mm-hmm. That it is important that we understand the content of that thing, that experience that we are carrying, because in one way or the other, it's affecting us. Let me understand that.
All right. So you speak about epigenetic trauma, and
Yeah, as it
brings
relates to
me
African diaspora, yeah.
brings me to the concept of generational trauma. You know, as you said, we don't operate in a vacuum, and our histories individually and collectively have shaped who we are as a people and as individuals. So, as we seek to understand ourselves, it is important. I spoke about honoring our emotions in grief and loss, but it is also important to honor and try to understand the experiences of our forefathers and how even there would have been transmission, possibly genetically, but even in terms of having to survive and the mechanisms that they had to adopt to survive, and so how some of those ways of being came into existence and would have been passed down through generations, and to appreciate what those experiences would have done and how they could have affected us. For example, even our disposition, even how we process a gesture, how we process a representation might be totally different from somebody in say France or Italy who never had the kinds of experiences that we did. So because we do not exist in a vacuum, as we look to self development, growth, evolution, it is important that we use the past to help us to help to inform where we are and where we're going. So, for example, if there are aspects of the legacies of which we are not proud, then how do we use what we have now? How do we build on what the others before us came to make a difference? For example, we speak about emotional intelligence now. We speak about emotional intelligence in our male gender. What was it? How did our males have to survive 100, 200, 300, 400 years ago that stimulated or that caused a kind of disposition, mindset, attitude, way of being to exist? And how have times changed? So how does there need to be adjustments now in terms of the dispensation that we are living in? And I just like to pause to say here that as someone of color, as a woman of color and of African descent, I have only in the last 10 years or so really come to honor my history, because when we are where we are now, we need to honor the fact that we have come through tremendous hardships, tremendous, I don't even know, horrific situations to be where we are. And so I see us as a very strong people, a very enduring people, a people who need to be proud that we were not emaciated or our race was not wiped out, and to celebrate even our existence at this point in history. Because there's much hardship that we can even grieve for, because collectively the African continent endured so much at the hands of others, but there's also so much resilience that we can celebrate as a people, even though we're scattered right across
Thank you for
the
that.
four corners of the earth. We need to
Thank you.
celebrate us, really, really celebrate how we've endured and how we've come out.
I hear that. And I believe those that are listening to us, they hear you. It is important.
It really is.
It is. In that when you look at what has happened to us in history, and we are still here,
Oh, yes.
and we are still here, even with the little that we have, we still smile. It's a sign that we are ready for life, that we are going to live.
Ah,
We are going to be here.
Darwin spoke about the fittest of the fittest. And I want to say on this podcast today that I believe that every person of color falls into that category. I really believe we are the fittest of the fittest to continue to be here, to evolve, to excel, to do well. You read about African men and women doing so many amazing things at such young ages, and you're like, we're it. Others may not be willing to acknowledge and recognize it, but we really do have a lot to celebrate
We really do.
with the little.
All right. Now, let me ask you this way. I'm looking for a solution. Then, of course, I'm going to move in again. When you were talking before, you did make mention of something important, which is writing, how you use writing. And that sort of prompt me into the question. Because right now, I am writing a series of books, the storytelling series for
Yes,
African diaspora.
yes.
Now, this series, of course, is looking at how we can use storytelling to build ourselves as a people and also to leverage it in our business. But as you were talking just now, I'm trying to think how could we use storytelling to heal ourselves, even because storytelling can also heal. That now you know who you are by storytelling. In fact, I remember in one of the series, because there are actually 5 books,
Hmm.
three of them have been published, so we are working on the other two. I did make mention of Africa, saying that how do you think our ancestors were able to survive if they didn't know the story of where they are coming from? By that I mean, in a very crude state, they needed to know where is water,
Hmm.
they needed to know where is food. Not that alone, but they also needed to know where is the danger to avoid.
That's right.
All this is coming through storytelling because for generation and generation, they have encountered different things in that piece of land. And if we have a minimum understanding of human history, we should know that at one point in time, humanity was living only in Africa. Only in Africa.
Hmm.
There was no other human being anywhere in the world because all of us are actually coming from Africa.
Africa. Hmm.
So, which means these people that were living at the time needed to know a lot to be able to survive because they were not alone. There were many other animals that were also living. So, history and storytelling become very vital for us.
It
How could
does.
we use that in healing ourselves, knowing what have happened to us? Help me with that.
Well, the first place I think is to be able to accept or to embrace our stories. So many times we are made to feel either that our stories are shameful and do not need to be told. I don't know if it's protocol, but we see what's happening in some parts of the world now in terms of African history being told in schools to the younger ones, which can help to direct them. But separate and apart from that, one very important thing is to accept our stories as being legitimate, authentic, and a significant part of history because much of our culture, our legacy, and our heritage are maintained or passed on through storytelling. And I believe that for many of us, we think that, oh well, I don't have much to say. Who am I? I don't need to say. But it's important. It's important to teach our children how we survived particular things. It's important to teach the next generation what we did that caused us to overcome a particular experience, and some of it is going to be oral and some of it has to be documented so that legacies are preserved, history is preserved. And even if I go back to psychology, a part of the healing takes place as we get it out. So, a part of our own healing, sometimes the insight comes when we are telling others our stories. Sometimes the revelations come when we begin to speak our stories. And we can be, I always say, we are the sum total of all our experiences. And so when we tell our stories, we are integrating all our experiences. Because those parts which were not maybe so pleasant, those parts which were victorious, those parts which were more comely, and we are able to integrate and to understand that our resilience, our ability to keep going on, our ability to be here came out of all of what we would have experienced or gone through. And sometimes, even when we're having pain, I tell you that even writing, for me, when I have gone through some of the most painful experiences in my life, like a breakup of a relationship or a loss, it is in the writing that I experience some healing. It is in the writing that I get catharsis. It is in the sharing my story with others that they say, oh my gosh. And it encourages, it builds up. And guess what? You come in a way recognizing that your experiences are valid and valuable. And it makes you want to keep doing. So I encourage writing as an expressive art, as a healing art, storytelling, as a point of healing for everybody, barring none.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Thank you. You see, as we are talking about storytelling, because essentially that is what we do here. You see, when we started just now, I told you to tell me about your story,
Yes.
your history, your background, where you are coming from, because we are passionate about it. As people of African diaspora, it is important that we tell our story, and of course, this story is not just for the sake of making noise.
No.
It is because it is absolutely important. It is absolutely important. Now, I want to go back again to the ancient because I want people to understand the importance of story. Okay, I made mention of our ancestor having to know where the food is, having to
Right.
know where the water is, having to know where the danger is to avoid. Of course, this I mentioned in the storytelling series. But again, let's look at food, for example, just for a moment.
Mhm.
How could we know that this particular thing could be eaten? Because we don't eat everything. And now, food that we eat, if you eat the right proportion, you will live. If you eat the wrong proportion, even of the same food, you will die.
You will, right.
A good example, if you take the right amount of sugar and you eat it, it will be looking very sweet in your mouth. Or let's say salt, for example, it will be good.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the wrong proportion of it, say maybe for example, you feed a cup with sugar. I'm drinking tea now. Maybe for example, you take a cup like this and fill it with salt and drink it, you will die.
Right.
Now, the question is, how do we know that? It is true story, true experiment, because for years, for thousands of years, people have been doing certain things that make them to understand that this is good, this is bad.
Right.
This you cannot do it because the consequence is that.
Right.
So now, so that even when the European wanted to come up with their fabulous story that Africa have no story, they didn't know what they were saying. Absolutely, they have no idea what they were saying. Because if the Africa didn't have history, all of them would be, in fact, European would not even meet anybody in Africa. Because history is what keeps you alive.
Yes.
It helps you to identify what is a danger in the forest so that you don't go to meet the lion and say, hey, my friend, let's joke. You don't play with the lion. How do you know that? Through history. Your ancestors have told you that those type of animal, you don't play with them because they have their own way up. They will eat you raw.
They're dangerous. But Obehi,
you've
just touched on something that's so critical. So I'm saying that you've made such a significant point. When you speak about how do we know which foods are good for us and which aren't, how do we know the proportions to be consumed? in a healthy way versus the proportion not to be? How do we know which spots are dangerous versus which spots are safe? How do we know what is medicinal versus what is not? And it speaks to storytelling in a simple and profound way, in that it speaks to storytelling from the point of survival right to the point of conquest. So when we tell our stories serve so many different purposes. Our stories serve to educate. Our stories serve to empower. Our stories serve to heal. Our stories serve to inform. Our stories set the foundation for stories to come. So it is really so very important. And thank you for even, sharing that again. I'm sure you have said it before. That it is just so important. How do we know? How do we know the what, the when, the where, and the how? Because our ancestors have passed down the information to us. And we are tasked with doing the same thing for those who come after us. We can't lose the essence. We can't lose the history or the her story, as some say. We can't lose it, and we won't lose it.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. All right, now that is something I want to ask you for a help to see if we can resolve that, which is about our limitations. Because sometimes, like you already pointed out, we don't know that we are able to do a lot of things, that we are powerful, that we are able to tell our story, that our story is equally valid, that we too do have a point of view, that we don't always need to see it from other people's point of view, that in this universe, you two are the center of your universe.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How do we realize those limitations? What effect does those limitations place on us when we don't know that we too can be the star of our movie? Because all of us, we are writing our own movie, but we need to be in it.
We need to
Let me
be in it.
understand
We need to play a
it.
central role. And I think that what you are doing is a very good place. By giving others a voice who are brave enough to come and tell their stories, what it does is that to the less brave, it gives some kind of empowerment or some kind of roadmap to say that I could possibly do that. But even outside possibly an external source or a formal source, such as a podcast, I want to speak about the value of community. Because in overcoming adversities, in continuing as human beings, community plays a significant role. In fact, I presume that you have come across it in your research, and as you write that during the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, it was found that individuals who had a community, whether a virtual community or a physical community, fared much, much better in terms of survival and in terms of mental health abilities. So I believe that our communities, starting with our families, our extended families, or local communities, can begin. Those of us who may have the awareness of the importance of telling the stories are now tasked with the responsibility of initiating that kind of safe environment where people are liberated to tell their stories. And in telling these stories, come to realize, but hey, my story is important. My voice needs to be heard. And as we do more of that, as we do more of the promotion of storytelling, as we encourage the embracing the total human being. So in my story, I am a mother, I am a divorcee, I am a writer, I am an offender management specialist, I am a counselor, I am an afraid girl, I am a girl who was impacted and a woman who was impacted by my own limitations. But out of that, I rise and I grow. And then my story needs to become that parachute for some other person or persons to help them to have a soft landing. So I think that to a large extent, it starts with those of us who are telling the stories in spite of the fear, telling the stories in spite of our concerns, telling the stories in spite of even feeling doubtful. What difference is my story going to make? Oh, you never know. Your story could be the beginning of something really awesome. We just never know. And we won't know if we don't tell the stories.
I think I will spend some time just reflecting on that because that is really powerful. Because how would the people know if we don't tell the story? Now, I used to say, I've said it a number of times here, that if we don't tell our story, we are shortchanging the universe.
We are.
We are cheating life. Because now imagine a simple book that was written in 1910. This book is written by Napoleon Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there were many other books that were written by at the time, no? But this particular book, Think and Grow Rich,
Think and Grow
is
Rich.
it has become a symbol that every person in the business world is reading.
Yes.
Now, because first of all, how do we even come to know of Napoleon Hill? It is through the book that he has written. Now, imagine that he have never written that book. How could we know of him? His name, if he wasn't the only person that was living at the time
Right.
in 1910.
And I must say,
Please.
1910, and we are at 2023, 113 years later, the tenets, the principles of the story in that book, Think and Grow Rich, are still very relevant today. And as you said, we would not be benefiting, the business people would not be benefiting. If not only the business people, individuals who are not necessarily in business. At least I haven't read all of it, but I've started reading that book and I've seen the absolute value. So to say that when we tell our stories, when Napoleon Hill put that into print, he left a legacy that can never be erased. And he left something that would, you see, his story was just from one man, but that book has impacted millions of individuals. And that's what our stories have the capacity to do. It's one woman's story. It's one man's story. It's one man's inside. It's one woman's inside. But it has the capacity to impact and change millions, billions even of life. And so that is even why I'm working on my memoir right now, because my story needs to get fully out there.
Absolutely. We are waiting for it. It is important. Your
It is.
story is the center of your universe.
Yes,
It must be considered important.
it is.
And for all of the people that are listening to us, I just want to point it out to you that your story is equally important, irrespective of where you are, what is your age, what has been your experience, whatever you have done, it is important. And note, you are the only person who can tell that story. Nobody is going to do it for you. And I think this is why it's even more valid.
Yes, yes. It's your authentic place. It's your authentic experience. It emanates from the very being, the inner parts of your being. And you said just now that regardless of your age, and that's something that I'd like to say to your viewers and your listeners, that one of the limitations that I find that we experience is this limitation of the boxes. So you're too old. You can't do that. You can't go out there. Yes, you can. I recently read of an 80-odd-year-old who is doing bungee jumping, that she started at 50, I think she was 55. That's her story. And that story is impacting others. She could have said, oh, I'm too old. I'm not going to do that. I'm not even going to let anybody know. But it's out there in the public realm to inspire others. At my age, I am also looking at taking on. So I'm in my fifth decade, and there are some things that I'm doing now. For the first time in my life, I am consistently following the advice of my forefathers and taking my health very serious. And I feel it is just phenomenal and an awesome thing. So I can say to any 50-odd-year-old, hey, you're not too late to start this. That's a part of my story. I started it and I'm having wonderful results in my body, in my health. And so I want to say that sometimes the categories and the boxes that we are either placed in or that we take on and believe, the schemas that we're fed that we believe, can inhibit us from trying. So we don't try, so we don't have that part of our stories to tell, or can inhibit us from telling the stories at all. So not to be limited by age, by class, by color of our skin. I mean, there is just no limit. And when we begin doing, find love at 60, 70, if that is your aim, if that is your goal to find love. Perhaps you don't want to, but tell others about how awesome it is to be single at 60 or 70 and how you maneuver and what you do. It's our story, and the stories must be told.
You see how my eye is just glory. It's beautiful when we talk about the story. It is beautiful. All right, now, as a psychologist, when people come to meet you right there in Jamaica, and you look at them that they really could be telling their story, or they really could be working more on themselves, because I believe that irrespective of where or what we might actually be doing, the real project that um, the real project we should be working on is our life. Your life is a project, and you are the project manager. You decide what happens to it.
Yes.
So when you see some of these managers who are not working enough on their project, and you want to tell them, hey, maybe you could do A, do B, or do C. Tell me, which are those A, B, C that you tell them to? I mean, where should they start from?
So we always say it starts from an awareness. You remember you spoke about your book having to do with the identity. I want to get the name right. You spoke about the identity of crisis or the crisis of identity. You
The
spoke
crisis of the crisis of identity, and
right,
of course, it's available on Amazon for those who want to check it out.
right. So for the clients who come to me, the first place we start, incidentally, is just tell me your story. Tell me why you're here. Tell me what brought you here. And in telling their stories, you are able to pick up pain points, you're able to pick up stuck points, and then you explore with them, where do you want to go? What do you want to change? Because being central players in our stories, or the central beings or persons in our stories, we have a good idea of where we want to go. But even if your client doesn't, you open options to them. So you look at areas of, for example, self growth, because we exist to connect, we exist in a community. So I help them to look at areas of interpersonal relationships. Are those where you want them to be? If they are not, what is it about them that you don't like? What would you like to change? We look at areas of occupation. Because of our limitations, some of us stay stuck in occupations and jobs because of the limitations we put on ourselves, and that includes my client, that we don't particularly like. We don't live our dreams. So one of the things I do is encouraging my clients to explore their dreams, to see what messages they may have told themselves or others may have told them that have held them back from going after their dreams, and to look at strategies. Because when you are living your dream, when you are living that which you were created to do, when you are not boxed in, or you're not living just one part of you, it actually helps you to flourish, to thrive, to do well, to impact. You're able to impact other lives. You're able to sow into other people's lives. And so those are some of the things that I help my clients to do, but it usually starts with awareness. And as we tell our stories, we get that sense of awareness. For example, I might have a client who can't have sustained relationships. And as we explore, it goes back to the place where you discover that the client may have felt or been told or taken on the message that your partner is going to leave you anyway. So, guess what happens? That client internalizes that message, it becomes a part of their core belief. And at the first sign of problem in a relationship, they're not going to let the partner leave, so they run. Or we look at how they attract individuals based on the stories, the beliefs that they have about themselves. So, as we work in therapy, it's a liberating experience that gives people the permission to explore and to be all who they have or were intended to be. And that includes the therapist. Because I must say to your viewers that there is a therapist or a theorist known as Erik Erikson, and he speaks about the psychosocial stages of development. And I'll say to you that when I was in my 30s, that is when I started to stagnate. So he says that when we're between 35, 36, and about 60, we either stagnate, where the dreams die, the hopes die, all the things that we'd want to do die, or we generate. And at that point, having been in business for 15 years, I decided that I was going to generate. So I generated and I changed my line altogether back to my roots, back to my calling. Here I am now in my 50s and I am looking to generate again. So it's a part of our evolution. It's a part of, you said the world is waiting on our stories. The world is also waiting on us, our experiences, what we bring. And many of us pack a mean punch and don't realize just how powerful and impactful and effective and life-changing our lives and our stories can be.
Thank you so much for that. How much I love that. And I love also that you made mention of Eric Clapton, because it's one of the experts that I mentioned in the book that I was talking about. You see, in the beginning, I was saying that it is good that we live the life that, or maybe we live the experience that we want to talk about. Of course, I take some time to explain a bit about his whole history, because now we understand why he even decided to venture into psychology.
Right.
Yeah, anyway, I'm not going to do a spoiler there. Another person that I also made mention in the book is Viktor L. Frankl.
Yes.
The writer of the book, A Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes.
I think life is beautiful if we really want to take it beautiful from a beautiful part of it. And now, Viktor L. Frankl will be head in the Nazi Germany, you know.
Right.
And he will go through a lot of stress, a lot of trouble. But see how he transformed his trouble into good. Because he is one of the most respected people in developmental psychology. But how did he get there? He get there through the experience that he went through.
He had to go through some things. And it brings us to the mindset that we have. You ask me, what do I tell my clients? I encourage my clients along the path of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. The fixed mindset says, I can only do as much as my abilities. The growth mindset says, I'll try. The fixed mindset says, I stop when I am frustrated or when evil is perpetrated against me. The growth mindset says, I'll find a way, even in my frustration. So having a growth mindset, an adaptable mind, because no doubt the horrors that he endured, he had to adapt mentally, even though he was there experiencing the physical evils. But he did. And he came out. And he has made such an impact on human development, human life in the area of psychology in his writings. So being adaptable is something that we can develop. We were not all born with it. Some of us may be more so than others. but it can be developed, like resilience, which is what Viktor Frankl had to be able to do what he did subsequent to his experience in Nazi Germany. Resilience is a characteristic or a quality that can be cultured, it can be developed. There is no truth that either you're born resilient or you're not. And so our mindsets are extremely, extremely important.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. And of course, to our audience and our demography, the African diaspora, we need to understand that in our community, irrespective of where you want to look again, because it depends on where you want to look, no? You sometimes see what you want to see.
Yes.
There are there are a lot of people that you can use as model. There are a lot of individuals in our community that have really done it, irrespective of what they have gone through. They have managed to emerge and they become symbol of reference.
Yes.
So I don't know your story. Perhaps you have been trafficked from Edo State, Nigeria, to Italy to become a prostitute. You have done this until a point you think you cannot go out of that. But I want to tell you that you can go out of that. Because if Viktor Frankl, in the time of Nazi Germany, basically at the time for the Jews in Germany at the time, the only thing in front of you is death. It was very hard that you will not die. Here, you are not going to die. Of course, you have a lot of psychological trauma that you are going through in that you are doing what you don't like to do. If really you don't like to do it, because there are some individuals who want to do this, okay? Maybe there was a war in your country. That is how you managed to get to Germany or France or UK or US or Canada, where you find yourself today. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what have happened to you. Right now, at this moment, what do you want? You can rewrite your history starting from this moment. That is the point. The power is in your hand. And talking of power again, sometimes we do give our power away, give it to some persons or some individuals, some institution, or some other thing. This is what we have to do. You need to grab it. Take the power. It is you. It is your power. Write your history. If you like the way it is, then keep on propagating it. Like, keep on celebrating it. If you don't like it, then rewrite it, reframe it. That is one of the things I actually discussed in the book, the crisis of identity, because sometimes we have this crisis, but we don't need to expect that somebody is coming to fix it for us. Nobody is coming. If you expect somebody is coming, you are going to die waiting. Instead, the only solution is you. Take it up. It's hard. Yes, it's hard. It was hard for Viktor Frankl too. It's hard for it was hard for Martin Luther King. It was hard for Michael S. It's hard for everybody, even for those who survive, for those who succeed too. So for you, it's going to be hard, but it's better trying than waiting that somebody's coming to save you.
Right.
All right. Now, I want to put the question like this. Well, why do you think, as a psychologist, why do you think people don't want to embrace who they are? Because now, like the example that I was giving, and now maybe we are looking at the first generation immigrants that are coming from Africa, they get to Europe, sometimes they are frustrated. If you go to the street of Milan, go to Milan, Italy, or in Paris or in Germany, there are a lot of Africans that are sleeping on the street. It is hard. I'm not saying everybody in Europe are doing this. Even in the United States, there are some people, they are homeless, no? They have become almost wasted. Say, maybe, for example, you find yourself in a situation that is precarious, really very precarious. What do you have to do? What do you do? How do you pick yourself up from there again and try to rewrite the story that you have for yourself? I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It's not easy. It has never been easy. It will never be easy. But when you find yourself in that situation, how do you embrace yourself and say, okay, now this is what it is. Now, let's make the next plan forward. Help you understand what you will say about that.
I want to take you back to something you just said, which has been proven to be very effective. You referenced looking at other people who had difficulties and made it. And psychology tells you that one of the ways that we can begin to move, we can begin to take that step, is paying attention to those who have been in similar circumstances and done it. So there may be others who have not quite made it. But for everyone that has not made it or is not making it, there's at least another one or two who are making it. Use those as your reference points. So one of the first things. The other thing I would say is, as you indicated, no one is going to come and save us. However, community plays a significant part in helping us up, in giving us that hand, in extending that hand to help us up so we can get on our feet. You ask, why don't we want to embrace ourselves? I think that as a people of color, the generational messages that have been communicated to us openly and succinctly have been so strong that we have taken them on. And even we have questioned or doubted our values. One of the things that it behoves us to know more about are the great Africans who did exploits, who created inventions, who we would not normally know about. But to be able to understand, to be able to appreciate and to accept that even though others may try to make us feel less than, because we want to belong, we want to be validated, we want that sense of security. And when we are made to feel less than through the movies that are made, through the speeches that are made, through the insinuations that are made, it's not easy for us to embrace our Black beauty, our melanin, our giftedness, our awesomeness, because the messages have come down through generations. The messages have come down through centuries that we are not good enough. But to every viewer listening today, I want to tell you that we are good enough regardless, and what, not only regardless, but because of what we have been through and are here and are, as long as we're here, there is hope. And it starts with taking one small step at a time. We will not write a whole book in a day. I have written Living Water for the Christian Journey. It took me many days and many small steps, but that book is now available and it's there to encourage Christian women who are going through financial challenges, relationship challenges, who are having a hard time breaking under the weight, WEIGHT, of their WAIT for deliverance. So it's purposing to take that one step. And if I am not strong enough in myself to take it, can I look around and see if there's another hand to whom I can reach out to help me to get up and to start to move forward? That is something I have had to do. The power of community. I have had to depend on and rely on other queens and other sisters to help me along my journey. I can't say enough, but regardless of who you're looking on today, I am someone who has struggled with strong feelings of insecurity and not wanting to put myself out there, wanting to step back at the last minute to say, no, I can't do it. I'm not going to be good enough. And that's another thing. We have been socialized a lot to be fearful of rejection. So we don't try because we're going to be rejected and we might fail. But hey, fall 1,000 times and get up the 1,001 time is going to be that time of victory.
Again, I'm taking some time to reflect on that because that is powerful. All right. Now, you said you're not going to do it all at once. And that brings me to the goal. How do we approach that? What is your recommendation? Because, when people want to move from, okay, jet is very fast,
Yeah.
Even for the jet, you need to take a certain amount of time to move from one end of the city to another.
Yeah.
So Tell me about that,
Okay.
the goal. How do we approach it? Yeah, please.
So we are, if we're not very clear in our mind's eye about the goal that we have, so we want the goal of self-development. We want the goal of thriving. We want the goal of moving out of poverty. We want the goal of being more educated. We want the goal of telling our stories. So in my own journey now, I recognize a number of things are important. You have the goal and you must be committed to wanting to move towards the goal. There has to be, even before the commitment, that conviction that this is what I want. So for me, it starts with a conviction for a desire for change. Then there is the commitment that I'm going to keep putting my resources and my energy into this. There is the whole essence of consistency. I said it before and I'm saying it again. Many of the goals that I have achieved have come through disappointments, but after many retrials. I shared with a group recently. I have been trying to get fit from 2018. It is only since December 2022 into now that I have been consistent. What if I had given up? What if I had said, Lord, I want to get fit, but I try and I fail? I kept going. I fall down and I get up. I say I'm going to the gym 5 days and I make it two, and next week I'm going again to one. So there is a kind of consistency that we believe that the goal is achievable, and that's where it comes back to the conviction. And another thing that is important, we can't get to the goal doing what we're doing now. So there has to come some change. So that ability to do things slightly differently is going to help us to get to the goal. So I would say conviction, commitment of our internal resources, and if we have to pull from external resources, consistency, and a change, even a little bit of change at a time to what we're doing now. Because if there was no need for change, we would have already achieved our goal.
I like that. That is true. It is important. No, that is very important. Because if you need something and that thing that you need, you don't already have it, it means there is something blocking you between what you want and where you are right now. So it is important to address that elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
What is stopping me from getting to that goal? What am I doing now that is not helping me to get there? Do I need to change something in how I deal with my time? Do I need to change my circle in terms of, with whom I'm associating? Do I need to change my perspective? You spoke about reframing that, and that we could spend an entire session speaking about the significance of reframing our perspectives and our situations that will propel us forward rather than keep us stuck. So, what are the small changes that I can make that will take me a little nearer to my goal? I can't stand up and show off to you now, but a part of my story is that I have a part of the goals of getting healthy was to lose some weight, because somebody told me in their story that too much weight around my midsection is not good for my organs. So, taking that information from somebody's story, I made that a part of my goal. And I can now proudly say that after 3 months, I have lost 10 pounds, and it is just motivating me to keep going. And I'm excited. And of course, I don't mind the compliments that I get when I walk. But it came as a result of hard work, commitment, consistency, change. I had to change some of the things I was eating and change how often I exercised. And I'm happy and I'm proud. And I want somebody else to take this today and say, yes, Yvette's story can be my parachute. Yes.
you are writing your story and you are at the center stage of it. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. Now, you have written a book.
Yeah.
What do you want to tell us about this book and how can people get it? That is very important.
The book is entitled Living Water for the Christian Journey, a 31-day devotional of healing and refreshing. I mentioned it previously, and it was born out of some of my own challenges, financial difficulties, and how I exercise my faith to get through. And I'm at a different place financially than I was back then. It speaks about friendships, friendship, faith, what we can do. It speaks about waiting when we're in the process on the journey to get to our goal. There is still some wait. The book speaks about the seasons of our lives. Many times we may be inclined to get stuck in the winter seasons, but I want to tell somebody today that after winter comes spring, and spring is beautiful and bubbling and radiant and full of life. So the devotional speaks to some of those issues and much more. It speaks to injustice in the workplace, and it is available on Amazon. Uh, right. So it's Yvette Boucher-Gardner, spelled Boucher, and the title is Living Water for the Christian Journey, and it's available on Amazon. It's born, I'm saying again, out of a part of my story, but also because I saw the need to encourage other women with my story. And so what has been said to me, I realize that it's achieving its goal. When somebody can say to me, every woman should have that book, I'm like, yeah,
Thank you so much, Yvette. Thank you so much. You are such a powerhouse.
thank you.
Thank you. All right. Now, so what would be your final thought here? Because I think the conversation has really been very interesting. And I want to believe that our audience will say the same. So to conclude it, what would be your final thought? It might be a message or a kind of a retouching of the point that you find important for you to communicate, or maybe something you wanted to say I didn't ask you. Please go ahead and do that.
My final thoughts. First, I want to commend you on taking this initiative and the work that you do, because you're obviously not only hosting the podcast, but you're writing and you're getting stories out there. So first, I want to commend you and to thank you for doing that for us. Then I want to say to your viewership and your listenership, whatever change you desire, don't give up. Or I should say, I'm going to not say don't give up. I should say, do keep going. Do keep trying. Do keep pushing past limitations. Do keep believing in you. Do keep believing that you are central. Do keep believing that you're important. Do keep believing that you can beat the odds. Obehi spoke about Viktor Frankl. He beat the odds. Many others beat the odds. Many of our forefathers beat the odds. And I'm saying to you, win afraid. You may be afraid. You may be scared. You may be fearful. I'm going to tell you today that I'm on this podcast through a lot of, I think, anxiety. And I said, I'm going to push through this and I'm going to do it afraid. So if you have to do it, and you will do it to become the absolutely best versions of yourselves, do it afraid if you have to. But never stop doing. Never stop being. Never stop speaking your story. And if you haven't started, start. Obehi, I want to tell them, somebody may have written the first script and you had no control over how your story started, but you can write the ending just as I'm rewriting mine.
I like that part. I like it. It's very interesting. You are going to be afraid if you need to do something that you have never done before. It is natural that you are afraid, but I like the way you put it. Go ahead anyway. Do it even if you are afraid.
Mhm.
That is what makes the difference, because everybody that have never done anything before, when you want to do it, you are afraid.
Yes.
If that is what you are, then what is the difference? The
Yeah.
difference is that if you want to succeed, you are afraid like every other person, fine. That is equal. But there is something more. Despite your fear, you still do it. That is not everybody does that.
Yes. Some people are held back by their fears. And I want to encourage you, my brothers and sisters, wherever you are listening, Please, I've done so many things afraid, and I've looked back and I've smiled. I say, walk into fear one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, and before you know it, you'll be on the other side of fear.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This is really have been very educating and full of information. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was my absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
If you enjoy this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. Rate and review Obehi Podcast and share with your friends who might need it. I remain Obehi Ewafo. Thank you so much for listening and talk to you in the next episode.